Hello friends! I heard you're looking for a healer. Can I interest you in a Mistweaver for that fun, refreshing goodness and...
No, God!
No?
No!
How about some discipline to get you where you really need to...
No!
Oh. No. Fine! Resto Druid it is! I kid the Resto Druids. I've actually been avoiding the spec for a very long time, probably out of personal biased spite. But I have to admit, Resto Druid is kind of fun. So if you want a basic rundown on talents, rotation, gear and stats when it comes to raiding and Mythic Plus, then you've come to the right place. Short disclaimer though, the guide is on the pick it up quick and do great with side. So I'm not going to go into super advanced stuff because believe me, there's a lot to talk about Resto Druid. So if you want to go into more in-depth things, either hit the comment section down below or visit us on our stream and we can discuss more in-depth class stuff. Maybe you have questions, maybe I have questions. So let's chat. Resto Druid have a few roles that can change based on your playstyle and the type of content you do. I will talk about one build for raiding and one for dungeons, but feel free to test out more if you like. When raiding, the default talent on the first row is the Cenarian Ward talent. It's an extra hot, so you will use it on the tank or someone soaking a mechanic in need of healing and such. Pretty straightforward. Next row is the first utility row, and get ready, cause we have a lot of them. I personally like Wild Charge a lot, but you can pick and choose what you wish. Third row is kind of a utility row again. I would recommend Feral Affinity. You get a passive move speed increase that helps you position easier considering most of your heals are instant. This will provide you with enough mobility if you know where the fire will spawn and have time to preemptively move. Next row, again by default, pick Typhoon. There are specific fights like Mechatork where mass entanglement is a must, so keep that in mind, but everywhere else, Typhoon will never fail. Level 75 is another row with options. To start your healing adventures, go with Incarnation as your default. It's a big healing cooldown and for 30 seconds nobody will die on your watch. Next up is Spring Blossoms. This is arguably the best one here, although I personally don't like to feel reliant on a static ground AoE heal. It's good, yeah, but I don't like it. And lastly, Flourish for the last row. Again, a row that isn't locked on any one talent. Flourish is an amazing cooldown that you can use when healing a lot of people. You want to use it when you know damage is coming, but even still can really put your group back up and healthy. For dungeons, you will change one or two things. I won't be talking about the utility rows since they really matter depending on the dungeons you do and the group you have. For that kind of talk, we can discuss it on the stream or in the comments. But as a default, first row, Prosperity is what I would recommend. All three are good, but dungeons have a lot more spiky damage that needs to be addressed sooner, and since you are the only healer, having that extra Swift Mend is gonna be good. Plus, it will synergize with a specific Azerite trait. Next three rows are the utility, like I said, and for the most part, you can keep them the same as for the raid build. Actually, for the level 90 row, you still take Spring Blossoms, same as in raid, so I guess nothing changes here either. And as far as I was able to find, nobody really changes this talent. Last row, however, you take Photosynthesis, which is an interesting talent to play around. Since Life Bloom can only be on one target, you actually have a choice as to which effect you want out of the two. Play with it and see what works for you. Resto Druids are one of the few classes that benefit from a healthy balance of all stats. If you have to choose though, eye level is always on top. Next most important one is Mastery, if you ever find yourself in a situation of choosing. And after that, Haste, with Crit and Versatility very close to each other. Once you start banking a stat a lot more than the others, focus on getting more of the stat you have less of, and you should be fine. For Trinkets, as a general rule, you want to use ones that proc big stat boosts, be it either Intellect, Mastery or Haste as a priority. But I will mention a few of the best ones if you can actually aim for them. By far the most used trinket is the Alchemy Stone. You have to make it yourself since professions are designed with a 2019 philosophy of not giving a f***. Next you can aim to get Ignition Mage's Fuse from Tol Dagor, Conch of Dark Whispers from Shrine, and the Crest of Paku from Conclave. Once the new trinkets from the Crucible raid are out and tested, I will leave a comment down below to let you know if anything changes. As for Azerite Traits, Resto Druid is an interesting case. One thing is that you want a lot of traits once, without stacking, at least for raiding. As for dungeons, you want to maximize the damage you do, but of course this comes down to you personally. Maybe you are not comfortable damaging in dungeons because that puts you at a risk, not as much as doing it in raids though, which is why you want to keep damaging in dungeons only, at least in cat form. As such, here are a few of the traits you want to get once for raiding. Autumn Leaves is really good for that extra second alone, since you will be using rejuvenation ideally on at least 4 targets, so the effect will only go up in value. Rampant Growth is again really good simply for the effect of also healing your Life Bloom target, with a heal over time effect. Lively Spirit makes your Innervate buff you with a major amount of intellect once it expires, changing the way you use it a bit. You definitely want to take advantage of that extra intellect at the end, so you have to be a bit aware of the encounter and plan ahead accordingly. You can fill in empty slots with Treacherous Covenant, since more intellect is always better. And if you really are out of better traits, Bonded Souls is also good even after the nerf. For dungeons, you can take Grove Tending Wands, although I have seen high key pushers stack this baby. You can stack it of course if you don't plan on doing any damage, and this is what I would recommend if you are starting off as Resto. You can still fill all the other slots with the raiding traits I mentioned as well. But if you really want to maximize your Resto Druids, take High Noon and stack it as many times as you see fit. Sunfire is an easy spell to use, and with 1 GCD you will put a strong dot on big ad waves. As with all healers and tanks, there is no rotation you can learn. At least not with the terminology of the word. Healers are meant to react or prevent certain situations from happening, and that has a lot of variety to it that you have to react to on the spot. As such, I will be talking about a priority system where you can understand what is the best spell to cast at any given point depending on the situation, at least for raiding. Efflorescence is the most important spell to cast under as many people as possible. Follow that up with Life Bloom on the active tank, keeping it up 100% of the time if possible, and you can also refresh it with 4 seconds or less left before it expires without wasting the bloom effect. Innervate yourself when your group is taking moderate amounts of damage and try to fit in an Efflorescence and a Wild Growth, since they tax your mana more than other spells. Always consume your Omen of Clarity procs on your regrowths as often as you get them. Use Cenarion Ward on cooldown. Keep Rejuvenation on your tank and any players that are taking damage either from dots or debuffs and such. Don't overuse Rejuvenation though if it's not needed. Swiftmend is next on the list as the most important spot heal. Spot healing is what you do when your target takes a burst of damage and you want to resolve that instantly without waiting for normal HOTS to bring the target back up. Once you know big AoE damage is coming, start casting Rejuvenation on as many targets as you have time for, usually about 10 seconds before the damage hits, and just as the damage is about to hit, cast a Wild Growth and then instantly Flourish. If you still need to cast something and nothing from before applies, use regrowths only as emergency heals. Without the abundance talent, casting normal regrowth is not worth it. And fill in with Moonfire and Sunfire, basically doing some damage as you wait. When in dungeons, it's a bit more simple in terms of actual healing. You can keep in mind the priority system mentioned just now. Regardless of the talents you have, regrowth will be something you use in heavy damage situations, since fights are usually shorter, so mana efficiency isn't as necessary in a fight-by-fight scenario. Let's talk very briefly about cooldowns, because understanding how they work can literally answer your rotation questions. Tranquility is an AoE cooldown that can be used both in raids and in dungeons as long as you don't have to move to dodge the fire. For maximum efficiency, cast a Wild Growth just before so that the Wild Growth HOTS stack with the Tranquility HOTS, therefore benefiting from your mastery. Only do this in heavy AoE damage taken by your group. Try to use Innervate as often as you can and pair it with Efflorescence, Wild Growth and Rejuvenation spams to make the most out of the mana reduction. Iron Bark is a straightforward single target damage reduction for a group member, usually the tank, but you could have Johnny Butterfingers being greedy on the DPS and taking all the mechanics to the face, like a champ. Flourish is again something to be used on cooldown, but used properly as mentioned previously, basically extending Wild Growth, Scenario Ward and as many rejuvenations as possible. Incarnation is a massive cooldown that can help you heal entire phases or a few mechanics back to back. It's tricky to say when to use it, but just try to make sure that you use it preemptively if possible, or to cover as much of the incoming damage phase as possible. For consumables, you will want to choose the stat you have less of, so either pick Mastery for your ring and weapon, which will actually give you more throughput in dungeons if you find your healing lacking. Or you can go for Haste on rings and weapons, which is what will work better in raids, and it will also work better if you plan on squeezing in some damage in either content you do. The logic applies to gems as well, either Quick Owl's Eye for Haste, or Masterful Amethyst for Mastery. I usually go for whichever is cheaper on my server, especially when I'm still gearing my druid up. The same stat argument can be made for food. Get the Feast, though if you can, if your raid is running feasts, of course. If not, either the highest mastery food or the highest haste food based off of what I just said before. And lastly, as always, for the flask and battle potion, get both intellect. However, don't forget your replenishment potions that will get you some mana back in tough, draining fights. If you want more healing adventures, try out the Resto Shaman chapter, and you can learn about the talents, rotation gear and stats, and basically everything you want and need for raiding and mythic dungeons. Shout out to our Patreons Hellhunter, Antimatter, Maverick and Helldope for being super supportive and super awesome. If you also want to become our Patreon, there's a link down in the description and you can find out more details. Or maybe you're in the Amazon field and you want an Amazon affiliate link, which we have, and it will give you a list of our nerdy Warcraft and PC goods. Thank you for watching the video. I hope it helped you pick up your druid and do something other than balance.